So hello everyone, welcome to week 6. Wow, we're moving through this. Yeah, for those watching online, thanks for sticking with us. This is a really cool week. So if you haven't watched our previous videos, I highly recommend watching last week's before we watch this one, just because this week is it's a dive into some very deep data manipulation. And it's really important just to have, you definitely want to have a little bit of background knowledge before we get into this, because this is really important. But if you don't quite understand some key concepts, it can get very confusing, and that's definitely what we don't want. So let's go ahead and let me get this going. Alrighty. Cool. All right, can everybody see this okay? Awesome. Cool. So yeah, so today it's two functions, but they kind of go hand in hand. You never see them without the other. It's group by and summarize. And so what this is, we're gonna get into this, but this is the bread and butter of data manipulation. And this is really gonna open up a lot of doors. And a lot of y'all in your C1s have already kind of run into this problem of wanting to like group things and find averages, but not being quite sure how. And this is how you do it. And it's really just, it's very much the gateway into much more advanced R than what we've been doing. So I'm very excited for today. So our outline for today, pretty simple. We have announcements, as well as we're going to review a couple things from our Happy Couples Activity Viz workshop. And for those of us watching, it's the Activity Viz 5 that you can find on the Google Drive. And then we're going to quickly review a couple questions to come up as like, what's the difference between proportion and raw numbers, which has been great questions, like really important concept in data science. So we're going to review that very quickly. Then we're going to do our demo, and then we'll have our breakout rooms. So just our quick announcements. C1 updates. I think I've met with everybody who's filled out the Excel sheet. If you haven't had the chance to fill it out yet, we still would like you to do it. Like it's obviously later than we would like, but at the same time, it's not too late. And so I think really we really stress that doing these C1s is really important. And also now we actually have the website going up. So if you kind of, the earlier you can get in this project, we have yet to have a project that we have thought is not good enough or cool enough or different enough to like publish. So we really would like you to do this because I think it's gonna be really exciting. And as part of that, I mentioned this in the Slack, but also for those of us watching and or if you're not following the Slack, this weekend, instead of office hours during my office hours from 12 to 1 PDT, I'm gonna be doing a workshop on heat maps. So you can kind of see what that kind of looks like here. This is something that Kevin and I made in class. And it's really, this is a very powerful tool. This is something that you'll see, everywhere. The New York Times 538 heat maps, particularly with geographic spaces, are really powerful. They tell a great story. They're very visualizing. And at the end of the day, if you've been following with us, they're not that hard. So we'll be recording this as well. And for those of us, in the class, actually, we'd love to have you live so we can help you with like specific questions and or data, but also feel free to watch it online or later if if that time doesn't work out for you. Cool. All right, let's go ahead and get to the homework review. Bang, pow, boom. Yeah, I posted this in the chat, so I'm not going to go through the whole part of all the follow-ups to this, but I do want to touch upon a couple of things, which is real quick. Just this final graph, kind of go through the code for you all. What's happening is so create a tibble where we had a column with met here, where we said yes. And then we're using this count function, which is very much a precursor to group by summarize, where we're grouping by locations. And then we create a proportion, which is n divided by the sum of n, which are those new columns that we may count. And we also wanted to reorder factor just so that we have it nice and in a row. And, I think this is just a very cool assignment, just seeing, where are people meeting. We can still see that, almost 25% are still meeting in restaurants, at least within, over all the age demographics. And, obviously, I'm sure if we subsetted this to a smaller group, maybe, or not small, but a younger group per se might be online or a college or a party, but it's still just cool. I think it's a very fun assignment. And one thing I did want to talk about is real quick is this difference between proportions and raw counts. And so really, like, as you can see here and here, there's very little difference, if any, in terms of like the column height with like proportion and counts. And when that makes sense, right? You don't typically, like, sometimes you'll see a radical difference when you switch to proportions or percents, but obviously that's not too often the case. So one is not inherently better than the other. Typically, you will see proportions more than not. A couple reasons for this, particularly when you start getting into big data, it's a little bit hard to read numbers when you get to very high values. You know, it's like when you start having to count zeros or something. So proportions can be a lot better. At the same time, you know, so that's the number one reason why people use proportions. It's just it's very easy to understand. It's a very quick number. You know, it's not, you're not having to deal with like 6 figures, 7 figures. It's just like, you know, 25%, 50%, etc. But sometimes that can be misleading, either when you have really big and or really small data sets, because, you know, 0%, we're not exactly sure if this still means there's like a decent amount of number of people being here. Whereas this case, you can see it's less than 200 or even 100 in this case. So that really is 0%. So, you know, with those questions, I would say that there's not necessarily a hard, fast rule about raw numbers or percentages. Typically, the convention suggests that you will be doing proportions more than raw numbers, but it's always good to at least, you know, when you're writing something or presenting, mention the raw numbers, just so there's not this impression that you might in fact be misleading people about the actual data. Yeah, so if there are any questions on that, please feel free to send them in the chat and Kevin will answer them. I'm sure he's made a comment in there already about how you just need to pay attention to that and not listen to the lecture. And then let me go ahead and let me share it again. We'll just go ahead. Oh, I didn't even need to do that. All right, group by summarize. So this is, so bear with me. I'm going to go through this relatively slow, and it is tricky. So, you know, if you have questions, I hope to get them. Feel free to ask them in the chat, and Kevin will try to answer them again. But we're going to try to take this as slow as possible, just because this is such an important building block. So you can definitely go through all of like the writing, but in essence, what group by is doing is it's basically saying, I want to group by the values in this column or multiple columns. So in this case, we have our empty cars, which we've used a lot. You know, we have all the different things. And so just so you know, everybody knows it. I have it right up here. So it's the number of cylinders between 4 and 8. So I'm saying, you know, in this case, it's only 4, 6, and 8. So I'm saying, I want you to group by these 3 values, all the 3 types of cylinders. So 4, 6, and 8. So I want you to basically, if we kind of, you know, think about this like, you know, spatially, it's like I want you to kind of have a group of every single value where cyl equals 4, a group of every value where cyl equals 6, and a group of every value where cyl equals 8. And so we're kind of dividing these. And what I'm saying is summarize means I want you to create new columns based on these groups, creating a new variable called mean miles per gallon, where it's the mean of miles per gallon. And what this is saying here is I want to have a new value, a new variable where I have the mean miles per gallons per these groups. And so that's the real key. That's why these will always be together. It's like whatever I'm making here, whatever function I'm doing, is going to be per these groups. And it will always be a function. And, you know, the vast majority of the time you are computing the average. And so what I did, and so what you can see here is we said, okay, for all the cylinders of 4, so for all, you know, we don't know how many columns there are. We don't know, because right, there might be a ton of cars that are in 4 and not many that are in 8. But for all the ones who have 4 cylinders, their average miles per gallon is 26.66364. And this is our new Tibble. You know, we have the same for 6, 19.74286, and 8, 15.10000.
Video is on. Video.
Yep. And so this is, you know, this is really, 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 it's tricky. It's a little tricky to wrap your head around, but like the basic idea is you're trying to say is like, I'm trying to group things. I want to find, you know, subsets, whether it's, and this could be like men and women. This could be breeds of dogs. This could be colors. This could just be any category. And almost always this is a discrete one. It doesn't make sense usually to do this like on, you know, like a scale, because like there's not many values that, you know, if you're gonna group by, and like the, you know, let's say cylinders was like a scale of like 1 to 100, you know, it's 2 might only have like 3 units in there. So right, it's not really that helpful. So it's almost always on discrete variables. And so, and you know, this can actually extend to multiple pairings. So here I'm saying for every group of cylinders in every gear, so every pairing. So now, so let me run this and then so we can see what actually was made. And so it's saying, okay, so we have for cylinders, we can have, you know, there's 3 types of gears, 3, 4, and 5. So I want to do where cylinders is 4 and gear equals 3, cylinder equals 4 and gear equals 4, cylinder 4 and gear equals 5. So every possible pairing, and they'll do every possible pairing whether there's a value or not. Because if there's nothing in here, you'll just see NA. And so that would mean, like, let's say we saw NA here, that would mean that there is no car with, or there are no cars with 4 cylinders and 3 gears, if that said NA. Now it says 21, so clearly there are cars. But then these are all the parents. And you could do this infinitely. Like you could add as many groups as you want in here. And that will then be able to give you all the different parents. So it increases, like, I'm not actually sure if it increases exponentially. I'm not exactly sure if that's how like the actual like math works out. But obviously it's increasing by a lot because of just all the different pairs. Alrighty. And another thing that's really important is you can actually, we've only been doing one, which is mean miles per gallon, but you can make 2 new columns where now we have mean displacement is the average displacement, again with these values, and that's really important. And this is very similar to the mutate function, which I'm actually going to get to, and I'm going to explain why these are different. Almost always you will do group by summarize. Summarize is just making the new columns. Group by is saying what am I grouping by. So in this case, same thing as basically the same thing as above, where we have every pair of cylinder and gear. But now we have what's the mean miles per gallons for all cars with 4 cylinders and 3 gears and the mean displacement. So the difference here between summarize and mutate, you can do both. What summarize does is it removes every column that isn't specified within the group by and isn't being made within the summarize. So here, obviously, we have cylinder, gear, means mile per gallon, and means displacement. Now, let's say I did the exact same thing, but with mutate. So mutate means that we have still kept the original empty cars data frame, but now we have these values. But as you can see, multiple cars have the same value. And that makes sense, right? Because there's multiple cars with 4 cylinders and 3 gears. Whereas here, we're just curious about the groups. Here, we have still maintained the individuals. And so this is kind of up to you. Usually it's group by summarize, but there could be instances where I still want to have every car in the data set, in the original data set, but I also want to see what their group average of miles per gallon, so group displacement is. So, it kind of depends what you want in terms of group by summarize, group by mutate. They functionally, they accomplish the same thing, but in terms of what you're trying to create, like what's the tibble, what's the data frame, they create very different things. And so it kind of depends on what you want to do with that. All right, let's run this last one here. Let's see, what's our time? Okay, yeah, we got plenty of time. Great. So let's just quickly run by what in the world was happening here. This was, if we took this away, just forget this, this was the exact same thing as we had done up here, right? We just group by cylinders. Oh, sorry, and displacement. Okay. Oh, no, that's right. Yeah, cylinders and displacement, and then mean miles per gallon means displacement. What this is doing is I'm saying, okay, I had this table, but I want you to create now a new column where we are reordering our cylinder by our means miles per gallon. And we've used this function before in the assignments. And if you're just joining us, or if you're a little bit fuzzy, basically what this is saying is I just want to order my cylinder column by the mean miles per gallon. And so you can kind of just see how that worked out here. It's a little bit tricky to see, but basically you just kind of have things in a row. Nothing too crazy here, but just like the point of this little extra tidbit, which is to see that you can continue doing things. But what you're sometimes going to have to do is when you group by something, it will remain grouped by. So right now it's still grouped by cylinders until we have this function called ungroup. And what ungroup is saying is now whatever you do, I don't want to be grouped anymore. So this is the exact same thing with that ungroup in there. And now the only difference, I guess it's a little bit tricky to see, but the only difference is now these two are now, this is no longer subject to the group by. So if I try to create new things, it's no longer taking into account of these groups. It's now completely, back to normal data set. And so this is really important to do. It's sometimes oftentimes there's no functional difference in the data set that you see, but this can, for whatever reason, when you're building new things or continue to work with the tibble, this can sometimes throw problems. And it's different every time. It's kind of hard to find a concrete example. But it is, this is you definitely, once you're done with this group by, you always want to throw in this ungroup function. Yeah, I think that's it. Yeah, we mentioned this little part about discrete variables. Yeah, if you've had questions about this and you're watching our video, please send us a chat. Please send it to the email that we have linked in there or comment on the video. We'd be happy to explain this. This is a very tricky concept to understand. And if you're in our class during the breakout rooms, we'll be sure to go this over. It is a tricky thing to watch. Most people don't get their first time. I certainly didn't get my first time, but I hope that this kind of helped you get a brief understanding of kind of what is going on. Cool. Thanks for watching.